Welcome back to these lectures, second half of U.S. history. In our last lecture, we talked about the emergence of the New South and the differences in the New South and the Old South, demographic shift, a rise of a professional middle class as a leadership group, the beginning of the cotton mill industry, the persistence of cotton as the South's primary commodity crop. And we're going to continue this discussion of the New South by talking about two things. First, Henry Grady, and second, lynching. Now, Henry Grady was the editor of the Atlanta Constitution in the 1880s, and he spent a good deal of his time trying to sell the New South to the rest of the country. He would travel to New England, he would travel out west, and he would approach chambers of commerce and local businessmen and try to convince them to bring their businesses to the New South. He said, look, gentlemen, we have navigable rivers that lead to the ocean. We have rivers and streams from which you can generate power. We have a large working class that need jobs, and they will not cause you trouble. They will not go on strike. They'll work for less money than people up north. We have natural resources galore. We'll give you tax breaks. Just a variety of inducements to bring northern businesses to the South. Grady would make this pitch, and he would sometimes talk about, or he'd make his funeral speech, which beautifully illustrates the predicament that the South is in. Being sort of trapped in this one-trick pony of a cotton commodity crop economy. Grady would tell the funeral speech, and it would go something like this. He'd say, a close friend of mine died last month in North Georgia. I went to his funeral, and he said, as I'm looking at my friend lying there, I notice he has a new suit on. And although we live in the land of cotton, that suit was purchased in New York. He said, I noticed the pine box that my friend was in. And although we're surrounded by endless forest here in the South, I noticed that coffin was built in Cincinnati. He said, I noticed the nails that held that coffin together. And even though we have iron ore aplenty here in the South, I noticed those nails were manufactured in Pittsburgh. He goes on to say that the headstone for my friend's grave is lovely. And although we have more marble here in North Georgia than anyone could want, this headstone was built in New Hampshire, in New England. He said, in fact, the only thing the South supplied for my friend's funeral was a hole in the ground. You can see the point that Grady's making here. The South has abundant natural resources that are not being used. This is the type of pitch that Grady would make to northern businessmen and to Southerners to illustrate how we are trapped in this commodity or this colonial economy utterly dependent upon cotton, when in fact we could diversify and become a much more powerful economic region if we would simply use the resources that we have. Now, I want to touch on one other aspect of the New South, and that is lynching. We're going to look at some photographs here, and I want you to notice some things that I find very peculiar. These photographs were taken in the 20th century in the South, and you'll notice the behavior of the white crowd in these photographs. You see one old white man, he's pointing upward to the African American bodies hanging from a tree as if we would not notice corpses in the middle of a photograph. You'll notice the crowd is quite festive. You see a couple here in the foreground. They're obviously on a date. They're holding hands. You see people dressed for this occasion. You see people crowding in to make sure that their image is going to be in this photograph. They want to be a part of this. You see another photograph here of three black men who have been lynched, and this looks like an urban setting. This looks like a utility pole of some sort. One of the black victims has been cut loose. He's lying on the ground now. And you see a crowd of white men crowding into this picture. You will notice smiles everywhere. You will notice that these men are wearing their Sunday go-to-meeting clothes. These are church clothes. These are their best clothes. They have ties on. They have hats. They have suits on. These are not working class clothes. This is an occasion, and these men want to be a part of it. Again, like at a wedding where the photographer tells everyone to squeeze in together so he can get you all in the picture, you can see that these white men are squeezing in so that they can be remembered as taking part in this travesty. You see children as well. And in this last photograph, you see an African-American lynching victim who's been cut down, and it looks like he's been set on fire. In fact, there's no doubt. You can still see him smoking or smoldering. And it almost looks as if he's been crucified. His arms are extended, and the same phenomenon prevails. The white crowd is dressed for the occasion. You almost get the sense that there's nothing to do in town tonight, so let's get dressed up and go to the lynching instead. Again, they're crowding into the picture with their best clothes on. I should add that the first photograph we looked at with the couples on a date and the old gentleman's pointing to the corpses, this was actually available as a postcard. You could buy this image as a postcard, and you could turn it on the back side, and you'd see there where you could put your address and your name, and you could address it to Aunt Dorothy or whoever you were sending it to. And you get the sense that you're on vacation, and we had a nice time in Florida, and we stopped at a lynching in Georgia, and here's a memento of that occasion. I sometimes ask my students, how is this possible? This is not another planet that this is taking place on. It's not another country. It's here in the United States, less than 100 years ago. This is a phenomenon that we have to address, and this is one of the reasons that I bring up American exceptionalism. Does vigilante justice and the lynching of African American men, does it confirm or does it contradict the notions that we have of American exceptionalism? Now, the last thing I want to mention is a famous court case, and we'll talk about this more when we get to the modern civil rights movement. But this is the Plessy versus Ferguson case of 1896. This is significant in American history because it institutionalizes the Jim Crow laws, indicating separate is not necessarily unequal. The Supreme Court will rule on this, and for a half century, this will be the law of the land, that separate facilities are not unconstitutional. This, of course, will be reversed in 1954 with the Brown versus Board of Education ruling by the Warren Court that ruled that separate is inherently unequal. This, of course, will open the door to the civil rights movement of the 50s and 60s, open the door to a massive desegregation and bringing about fundamental change in American society. So I'm going to end this short lecture on the New South there, and we'll pick up with the Industrial Revolution when we get back. Thank you.